The BYU Cougars are a 6th seed in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. I am concerned that BYU for the second straight year faces a one-and-done scenario against an A10 opponent. It happened last year against the Duquesne, the Dukes or whatever they were, and it might happen this year against the VCU Rams. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Wanted to hop on here right before I go and hop on BYU's press conference and talk a little bit about where BYU is seeded in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. They got a 6th seed. Now, I was thinking all week long, based on the work BYU had done down the stretch, a 9-game win streak, I thought that the NCAA selection committee would reward BYU, but alas, they go from what I thought was a 5 seed, Joe Lunardi, who I consider to be the top bracketologist out there. Some of you may disagree, but he had them as a 5 seed in his final bracket projection. They get the 6th seed. Now, I understand that those obviously are negotiable with regards to Sunday play issues. But I just look at this and say BYU a 6th seed for the second straight year, third straight time, if I recall correctly, going back in their recent NCAA tournament appearances. And then they get the VCU Rams as an 11 seed. Pros for this for BYU. Travel to Denver. That's an easy trip for BYU fans. There's a lot of BYU fans living on the Front Range. I know a lot of Cougar fans will be in Ball Arena there in Denver come Thursday whenever this game tips off. I don't have a tip time in front of me, but I know that a number of you will make that trek because it's relatively easy travel. VCU has to make the long trek across the country from Virginia. Former Utah State coach Ryan Odom is the head coach of the VCU Rams. Former Utah State guard Max Shulga is their star player. He was the A10 player of the year. The reason why, on the flip side of this, why I fear VCU is, remember last year, BYU came into the tournament a hot item, a team that a lot of people thought could make a run in the NCAA tournament, and Duquesne just absolutely was ferocious defensively, got up in the proverbial shorts of BYU's team and did not allow them to really operate the way that they wanted to. Well, this VCU Rams team, they're very much that same style of team. They've got a really, really defensive-oriented style. They got a pretty balanced offense. I think there's 4 players in VCU. Yeah, 4 players averaging 10 points more, all of them on the guard line. Shulga and Joel Bamasile, I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly, average 15 points per game. Philip Russell, 10, and Zeb Jackson, 10.6. So they've got a balanced scoring punch, speaking of VCU, but their defensive metrics, that's what scares me. Greg Wrubell put this out there. They're first in effective field goal percentage defense, 4th in 2-point field goal defense, 7th in blocks shot percentage, 23rd in 3-point field goal defense, 23rd in defensive efficiency overall, 31st in steal percentage, 31st in turnover percentage. Those are really, really good defensive numbers and have me concerned that BYU, a team that it needs to be able to kind of have its free-flowing offense unimpeded by physical, we're going to foul you at all costs type teams. Look at what happened against the likes of Houston for BYU. That's my concern here for BYU. I don't like the seed line. I do like the travel. I don't like the opponent. I do like the fact that if BYU can somehow get past our friends in VCU, I think the Wisconsin-Montana matchup, that's ripe for the picking for BYU. I have not been impressed by Wisconsin personally. And I know that Wisconsin's a 3 seed. They come from the vaunted Big Ten. I just look at this and say, if BYU can find a way past VCU, because I really do think that that's an interesting matchup in the first round for BYU. They handle their business. I think BYU is a trendy pick to go to the Sweet 16. I really do think that. So if you're a BYU Cougar and thinking you were going to get that 5 line, well, use it as motivation. Say, hey, we got dropped to the 6 line, and so be it. I think the biggest thing is you look at what VCU can bring to the table is that they are just a physical, very defensive-oriented team who has balanced offense from their guard line. Now, I think BYU, conversely, very battle-tested. BYU has played, I don't know how many quad 1s versus quad 2 games. I think it's north of 20 across the schedule for BYU. So in terms of battle-testedness, BYU has that in spades. I saw VCU was 1-1 in quad one games. They beat Colorado State and Henderson, Nevada. They lost at New Mexico, both Mountain West teams. The Mountain West only got 4 teams in, I think is what they got in. Also, Daniel Clark, the real snub is having the committee rank Iowa State ahead of BYU makes no sense at all. I can tell you why Iowa State got ranked ahead of BYU. Look at the non-conference schedules. And Kevin Young, he said this before, he'll say it again. He does not ever anticipate having that soft of a non-conference slate ever, as long as he's BYU basketball coach going forward. So I really do think that the VCU game scares me much more than a second-round matchup against a 3-seed Wisconsin. I know that's crazy probably for many of you to hear me say that, but I look at where things stand here for this BYU squad. If they can find a way past VCU, Craig says this, VCU only 3 quad one games, defense against A10, they are a paper tiger. Hey, I'd love for them to be a paper tiger. I think the simple fact of the matter is if BYU advances in the NCAA tournament, that in and of itself is an accomplishment because, yet again, I say this often, BYU is not advanced in the NCAA men's basketball tournament outside of a first round. Remember, they played that Iona team back in, was it 2014, 2015? They got out of that Dayton matchup with that win there. But no actual first round advancement since the Jimmer Fredette era in 2011. It's been 15 years. It's high time BYU proves they can make some moves here in March Madness. And I really do think that if BYU can advance to the Sweet 16, there's a big opportunity. My wife's calling me, and that's always fun to have that pop up while I'm doing the live show. But the bigger thing is that BYU, I think, has a major opportunity in front of it should it advance past this first round. Devin says this, if we advance past the Sweet 16, if we advance to the Sweet 16, I like our chances against Bama. They do not have good defense. Nate Oates' Alabama team, much like BYU, they're more offensive oriented, but I would actually take BYU's defense over Alabama's. I agreed there. Ashton Ellsworth, any news on Cannon catchings? Last I heard, it's still a day-by-day deal. Like I said, we're going to be talking to BYU on a press conference here in 7 minutes' time. So there'll be an update coming after that, but I still think it's a day-by-day deal. Everything I have heard is that when Cannon went down injured, the whole goal was to have him back for March Madness. That didn't mean the Big 12 tournament. That didn't mean the regular season. They meant for the NCAA tournament is when they wanted to have Cannon catchings back in the lineup. So overall, interesting alignment. VCU and Ryan Odom have familiarity with BYU from the time that Ryan spent in the state of Utah. Now, Utah State did not play BYU, if I recall correctly, while Ryan was head coach of the Aggies, but simply being in the same state, I'm sure BYU can pull film from that era of the Ryan Odom era at Utah State. Look at Max Shulga then, look at Max Shulga now, speaking of the A10 player of the year. So it's kind of funny to me. I really do think that should BYU get past this VCU squad in the first round, they could make a run. And we'll see. I'm very interested. I wanted to see BYU as a 5 seed. And I know that when the first bracket came out, there was a 5 seed that put Michigan in Denver. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. But the nice part is they are going to Denver. I'm sure many of you are probably making travel plans literally right now, flights, arranging cars, whatever it is, hotel rooms to go out there. I would encourage you, if you are a Cougar fan capable of getting to Denver, Colorado, to Ball Arena to watch BYU play, get there, support BYU, be there in the stands and let them know that Cougar Nation is behind them. We all know that BYU fans show up everywhere BYU goes, but I do think that this is an advantageous bracket for BYU after that first round. So kind of interesting. Yeah, a good point here from Evan. BYU cannot do what they did last year against Duquesne and start soft. Also, Demon and Nell need to wake up. I do think I agree with that. Demon and Nell do need to show something more, and you cannot be soft against a team like VCU. Remember, they got off to a really, really slow start against Duquesne, and that only emboldened Duquesne to get more physical with BYU, and we all saw what happened last year. They tried to make a push. Jackson Robinson, obviously now at Kentucky, tried to get BYU back into it late in that game, but it never came to fruition. So I do also, okay, so Matt, thank you for that. VCU was 2-1 in quad one games, lost to UNM. That was Colorado State, and I guess there was one other one in their Q2 matchup. So I think that, yeah, it's a nice bracket for BYU pending them advancing. And that's kind of the big bugaboo with this BYU team. 32nd he's played in the NCAA tournament. They have that moniker of being the most appeared team in the NCAA tournament without a Final Four berth. They also haven't advanced past the first round in 15 years. Let's see if they can prove us all wrong and show something here in March Madness. I think this team's got a chip on its shoulder. They want to make some noise, and hopefully they can get it done. So, Henrik, if Kentucky loses to Troy, that would be hilarious. Yeah, Troy, obviously the 14 seed facing off against 3 seed Kentucky. Ron, BYU can't keep coming out slow like these last few games. Absolutely. Eric Evanson, get the dang monkey off their back. Win against VCU. I think that would be a big part of it. Just simply win. Just get a win. And I really do think that Wisconsin-Montana 3-14 matchup, it's a tasty, tasty matchup in my mind. So first things first, handle VCU Thursday, and then handle whatever comes after that on Saturday, and we'll see how it all goes. And Swing Savvy, this is at 11 a.m. on Thursday. I'm going to flip a brick. I hate to tell you, Ryan, but this is BYU. They always put BYU at the most awkward, inopportune times when the NCAA tournament kicks off. But hey, fingers crossed we get a primetime alignment. It'd be fun to see that. So I got to hop off. I got to hop on this press conference, but wanted to sit down and talk a little bit about that seed line. I don't like it being a 6 seed. I was hoping all week long that those 5 seeds being projected by Joe Lunardi would in fact be the case, but BYU, as often seems to be the case, he got bumped down a seed line and now really gets an interesting matchup against the VCU Rams. I'll have more for you guys coming up later on this week as we talk more about what to expect from VCU, get comments from both coaches, all that stuff. You got it covered top to bottom. But the path is there for BYU. Now we all know where BYU needs to handle their business, and we'll see how it all goes. But as always, thank you for you guys' support of the podcast. You guys are the absolute best, and we will talk to you guys again soon, right here on Locked On Cougars.